Have you ever wondered if the advice you're following to lose fat and build muscle is wrong? Well, I believe it is, and it's holding you back from getting the body you want. In fact, I know it is. Because just a few years ago, I decided to go all in on improving my body composition, building muscle while losing fat, and it completely transformed my body, and has also worked for literally hundreds of my clients too. In this deep dive, you're gonna learn exactly what to focus on for both your nutrition and training, and what garbage old school advice you can just forget so you can finally start getting results like these. Whether you've got over 50 pounds to lose and you wanna make sure you don't end up looking like a prisoner of war at the end of it, or you're skinny fat and you want to finally look like you lift weights, the first thing you need to know is how to stop wasting time with diets and training plans that are taking you in the wrong direction. If you had to go to the store and your car needed gas, would you get gas on the way or take 2 trips? You'd obviously do it in 1 trip, right? Because driving all the way to the store and back only to go to the gas station afterward would be a waste of time since it's on the way. But that's exactly what most guys are doing when they try to lose fat first, then build muscle. Because building muscle and losing fat are 2 separate systems that can happen at the same time. And by focusing on both goals simultaneously, you'll see much faster visible progress. I mean, look at my client Alex here. He's 44 years old with a young family. He lost around 25 pounds total over the course of about 4 months, while getting stronger and building more muscle along the way. And we're gonna dive deeper into the exact system he used to make this happen. Now, you might have heard that your ability to lose fat while building muscle is determined by how lean you are, how long you've been training consistently and intelligently, and whether or not you take steroids. And while that's all true, it actually does not matter for 95% of people. You will definitely build more muscle while you lose fat if you fall into these 3 camps. You're over 15% body fat as a man, you haven't been training consistently for 6 months or more, or maybe you have been consistent, but just not really doing things intelligently with your workouts or your food. But even if you are leaner, more advanced, or you've been training smart and hard for years, if your goal is to lose fat and build muscle, you'll still want to set up your nutrition and training to support that in order to at least preserve as much muscle as you can. Even though I was carrying around some extra fat, I was able to at least hold on to my muscle while getting leaner because I continued to focus on building muscle while I got leaner. All that to say, if you want to look better shirtless, you want to be more toned and defined, or avoid being skinny fat after losing a bunch of weight, stop worrying about whether or not it's possible to lose fat while building muscle, because it is. And stop worrying about whether or not you're qualified enough, because your plan's gonna look the same. Either way, just eat and lift in a way that supports both muscle growth and fat loss from day one, and your body will take care of the rest. But how do you do that? If you want to be leaner, you need to convince your body to drain your fat cells for energy. When your body burns more calories each day than you're eating from food, it has to find that energy from somewhere, right? So it uses the fatty acids from your fat cells for energy. As a consequence, you get leaner and lighter. But most guys go about this all wrong. You might think you can do a bunch of workouts and cardio in order to get yourself into a calorie deficit, but you'll likely end up just putting in a ton of effort and time and building some muscle, but not losing much fat. If you want to avoid that, you need to do things differently. Take a look at this graph that shows how your body uses energy in a day. I mean, most of the calories your body needs go straight to things you don't even control, like keeping your heart beating or your hair growing and your brain alive. Apparently, my body has shifted all its energy to stop growing hair on my head and instead is focusing on my back hair and the hair on my ass cheeks. But in any case, a ton of the calories come from all the stuff you do every day, like just washing dishes, walking around the house, and really ultimately purposeful exercise doesn't really burn that many calories. So relying on workouts and cardio alone to lose fat isn't really an effective way to lose a meaningful amount of weight. It's like reinflating a flat car tire every single trip instead of just changing the tire. And take a look at my client Bryson here, for example. He's gone from 280 pounds to 215 in the last 8 months. He's lost over 11 inches on his waistline, built muscle along the way, substantially improved his blood chemistry, and is feeling amazing about his progress. And that's because we fixed the deeper issue at hand. You need to substantially increase your daily calorie output and reduce your daily calorie intake. But how do you do that? You don't need to do cardio to lose weight. I mean, Bryson's just been going for walks with his dogs. He's not done any formal cardio. Cardio can help you burn extra calories. It'll help you have better sex and you feel great afterwards, the cardio. But whether or not you do cardio, you can still meaningfully increase the amount of calories you burn on a daily basis by setting a daily step goal and keeping track of it with like a Fitbit or your phone. Even shooting for 6,500 steps per day at a minimum is a great place to start. And you could push it all the way up to 10,000 per day if you had a lot of time on your hands. And for Bryson, looks like he's averaged around 9,000 steps per day over the last 9 months. But even more importantly, you need to control your food intake if you want to force your body to tap into those fat stores. It's just vastly more efficient than hammering hours of cardio or even steps alone. You can do that by tracking your calorie intake using an app like MyFitnessPal, Macro Factor, Chronometer. For Bryson, we spent the majority of his time right around this 2,100 calorie per day mark, which is leading to a little over 2 pounds per week of weight loss. I've personally been using Macro Factor for something like 1,000 days to log my food. It's the fastest food logger available on the market. My girlfriend and I both use the annual subscription. because it works out to about $6 a month. You can try it 2 weeks for free by using my last name code Marra, M-A-R-R-A, at the checkout. But how do you know if you're eating the right amount of calories to make sure you're losing fat and still able to build muscle along the way? Well, if you eat too many calories, your body won't tap into fat stores. And if you eat too few calories, you're gonna have a hard time sticking with it long enough for it to matter. And your body will have a much harder time building muscle. We wanna keep you in that sweet spot where you're just fed enough to train hard and recover, but still losing weight at a reasonable pace. I mean, for most guys, that's gonna mean losing something like 0.5% to 1% of your total body weight each week. But how do you know how many calories you should be eating? If you use Macro Factor, it'll recommend some targets for you based on your setup. Otherwise, you'll need to calculate it yourself. Using my calorie calculator here, you'll wanna punch in your stats. Tell it your age, your height, your weight, and your activity levels, then tell it you wanna lose fat. And we're aiming for something like 0.5% to 1% of your weight per week, right? So for a 200-pound guy, that's 1 to 2 pounds a week. And it'll give you an estimate for how many calories to eat. You can grab this tool using the link in the description box totally for free. Now, you're gonna eat this many calories for 2 weeks. In a bit, I'm gonna show you how to fine tune your calorie targets based on how your body weight responds. But first, we need to help you figure out your protein targets to help your body gain muscle while you lose this fat. Did you ever hear the story of the Kansas State University professor who lost weight eating only Twinkies? It worked because weight loss is as simple as calories in, calories out. If you eat more calories than you burn, you gain weight. If you eat less than you burn, you lose weight. But losing weight is not the same as losing fat. If you want to make sure that most of every pound you're losing is fat and not muscle, what type of food you eat also matters. You can't just eat Twinkies. And the most important thing to focus on here is your total protein intake. We've seen across dozens of studies that a high protein diet protects against muscle loss during weight loss. And when it's combined with resistance training, it is a powerful effect that can even help you build more muscle along the way. So how much protein should you be eating if your goal is to build muscle while losing fat? Well, if you're a big dude with lots of weight to lose, the old 1 gram per pound rule might be overkill for you. A better way to go about this is just to find your height in centimeters and eat that many grams of protein each day. If you're a leaner person already, anything in that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight will be great for you. There might be even some benefit to going up to 1.1 gram per pound of body weight, but it's not a huge deal. And I think with the cost, dietary flexibility, and overall enjoyment of going up there, it's probably not worth it for most folks. But just knowing how many calories you should eat each day isn't enough to get your weight moving in the right direction. So how do you actually make sure you're consistently eating the right amount of food each day to get the scale moving without falling off the wagon with it after a few days? Have you ever tried tracking your calories and it goes well for maybe a day or two and then things just kind of peter off and you end up giving up? We've all been there, even me, and a lot of the people I know who are super successful with calorie tracking have lost a bunch of weight and have done it for years, all made the same mistakes that you've probably made too. The only difference is that when you swear it off at the beginning, you don't actually get the chance to get good at calorie tracking, which makes it more efficient and more effective and just less of a headache overall. So here are a few tips to make sure you don't get stuck in that calorie tracking no man's land where you're putting in work but not seeing any results. Most importantly, you need to be completely transparent with these tracking apps. They're an accountability tool. You're not just there to impress the app and try and make it seem like you're doing a good job when you're not actually. A great motto for this is, if you bite it, you write it. If you're tracking your food but you're underreporting what you're eating or forgetting to log certain things, then weeks might go by and you keep reducing your calorie goal, and before you know it, you're eating 1,200 calories per day and still not losing weight and wondering why, which is super frustrating. So just be as inclusive as possible. I also recommend just logging your food immediately after you eat, because if you leave it all to the evening and try and remember it, you're gonna forget things. Also, how do you know how many calories you have left for the day if you don't have a running log going with what you've eaten? Keeping your meals simple and repeating them from day to day also makes shopping, prepping, and tracking so much easier, because you can just copy paste the entries from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday and so on. Using a food scale also helps you stay far more accurate with your food logging, because just eyeballing foods and using cup and tablespoon measures is a really easy way to dramatically underestimate how much food you're actually eating. And if you're thinking, Matteo, what about a restaurant meal or a family meal? I don't know what's in my wife's cooking. Well, here is a simple tool you can use. I call this the 250 method. Say you go to your mother-in-law's house and they cook lasagna for dinner. You're not gonna be like, hey, mother-in-law, how many calories are in this lasagna? Because she'll slap you across the face and you're gonna get a divorce. So what you do instead is you just estimate how many calories are in that lasagna in 250 calorie increments, rounding up when you're not sure. So you look at the lasagna and you go, self, is this lasagna 0 calories, do I think? The odds are probably no, right? So it's at least 250. And if you think it's more than 250, then it's 500 or 750, 1,000, and so on. You just estimate in a 250 calorie increment, you round up, you find an entry in your logger app that's homemade lasagna, you just crank up the serving size till it says 1,000 or whatever you picked, you log it, you move on with your life, and you never worry about it again. Being able to take imperfect action with your logging and get somewhere in the right neighborhood is a huge deal and way more effective than always just being all or nothing with it and thinking if you can't get the perfect macros, then it's not worth it at all. You don't have to be perfect with tracking in order for it to work. You just have to be consistent. Now, this next part of my system is gonna make food logging so much easier for you so you can finally lose a ton of fat with it. To help you understand, here's my client, James. He paid a coach for a nutrition plan and they told him the exact number of calories, how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbs and fats he was supposed to eat, and at which time of day each meal was supposed to be. So he'd find himself doing math every single day to figure out whether he could have, 156 grams of asparagus and 7 grams of olive oil, or 221 grams sweet potato, 11 grams butter. It wasn't just a pain in the ass to calculate it all, since he's a lawyer with other shit going on in his life that isn't fitness. It was also a lot more restrictive as far as what types of foods he was allowed to eat and in what amounts, right? And all that makes this whole process so much harder to stick to. Sure enough, that program didn't end up working out for him, and a few months later, he reached out to me. And now he's down over 60 pounds in the last 9 months alone. And here's the kicker. He never once worried about how many grams of fats or carbs he was eating because he's not a fucking bodybuilder, and you aren't either. So let me show you how you can do the same. This is the nutrition priorities hierarchy outlined by Dr. Eric Helms, who's a pro natural bodybuilder, one of the top science communicators in the fitness space. Highly recommend checking out the 3DMJ YouTube channel. At the base of this pyramid are the most important variables when it comes to changing your body composition with regards to nutrition. Without a calorie deficit, negative energy balance, you won't be losing a bunch of fat anytime soon. Once you've got that squared away, the next most important thing is your macronutrient setup, the most important of which being your protein intake. When it comes to losing body fat though, your results are gonna be basically identical whether you eat a low carb diet or a low fat diet, as long as protein and calories are in check. Regardless of what some dummy on social media might say to you, research has shown that low carb and low fat diets work basically the same here. Outside of extreme scenarios where you're eating a super low fat or super low carb diet, you can basically just ignore carbs and fats altogether. As a disclaimer, it's worth taking a look at a week of your food logs just to see how your usual intake kind of shakes out. Probably best to not go below 0.3 grams of fat per pound of your body weight for an extended period of time because they're necessary to support hormonal health. And you can always tweak your food choices later if you find you feel a little better on higher carbs like I do. But all this calorie and macro talk begs the question, what should you actually be eating in order to make this happen? When I first got into fitness, I thought that clean eating was the only way to be healthy and lose weight. So I avoided eating junk food and drinking booze entirely, and it made me fucking miserable. I learned about flexible dieting, which showed me that I could eat all the fun foods I wanted as long as I hit my calorie and protein goals and still move in the right direction. So your boy just started eating Pop-Tarts, chocolate bars, and fucking chicken breast. Again, completely missing the point here, Matteo, but that led me to having some bloating, energy crashes, and just feeling super hungry in between meals. I finally learned that the real sweet spot lives right in between the two. Having a framework of healthy eating as a foundation while keeping the flexibility to enjoy fun foods along the way gives you kind of the best of both worlds. But how do you actually make that healthy eating framework something that you can stick with? Now, here's what we did with my client, Paul. He was an athlete in college, but after becoming a father, opening his own business, and having 3 kids, he found himself at an all-time high weight of 351 pounds. And following a family tragedy, he realized that getting his weight and his health in order were more important than he once thought. But because all his non-work hours were spent driving the kids around to soccer practice, he never had any time to eat healthy or work out. He found himself ordering DoorDash every night for his family, all while just his weight continued to climb and he really had no time or energy to figure this out. So we set him up with our simple meal strategy that he could use to prepare all his weight loss meals in basically 10 minutes per day. And he lost 61 pounds this year. Instead of just trying to find more hours in the day or cook complicated meal preps, he needed a system that fit in with his life. So we basically just found a few simple, repeatable, high protein meals that he enjoyed. I call them Marra meals. Simple stuff like rotisserie chicken thrown into a tortilla, some spring mix and low calorie dressing, or just whey protein with yogurt and fruit for breakfast. And that made shopping, prepping, and tracking his calories so much easier. And most meals took him longer to eat than they took to prepare. I recommend even getting your groceries delivered if you can every 2 weeks or so the healthy eating options are the default. That way you can just set up a daily win with high protein, lower calorie meals as the cornerstone of each day. Fruits, veggies, starches, whole grains, and lean proteins. And then you just feel free to enjoy sweets, alcohol, or restaurant meals in moderation as long as you can fit them with your calorie goals. Now let's get into exactly how many meals per day you should be eating to make sure your body's able to build muscle while you're losing this fat. To help you understand, look at this beard I used to rock. I still had to trim this bad boy every once in a while to keep it looking svelte. Otherwise I'd just look like a mountain man. I wasn't taking a lot off. I just clean up a little bits around the edges, a few strays here and there. Or if I want to keep it shorter, I just fully lop it off once every single week. Either way, I'm just maintaining my beard length, right? What determines whether or not my beard gets shorter or not is about how much total hair I remove each week, not how often I trim it. And your meal schedule is the same. It doesn't really matter if you want to fast each day or eat 6 meals a day, or you eat before bed instead of in the morning. Your body is just taking that energy as it is available on a rolling basis. And what matters most is how many calories you consume on a weekly and monthly basis, not how they're dosed throughout the day. So fasting can make it easier to hit your goals for some people, but it's not magic by any means. For most people, eating something like 2 to 4 protein-dense meals per day is gonna be the best for muscle growth and makes the most logistical sense with a modern schedule. Now, let's cover which supplements you should be taking to get the best possible results. Let's revisit that pyramid from Dr. Eric Helms here. You can see that the overwhelming majority of your results are gonna come from what you're doing with your food choices and total energy balance. And this graphic still has to be legible, but if it were scaled to size of importance, I'm sure this supplements piece of the pyramid would be so ridiculously small that you wouldn't even be able to read the font. The list of supplements that actually do anything at all reliably and safely is so small that we're looking at a tiny detail here. And beside that, we know that supplements are a Wild West industry that's largely unregulated. So a lot of what's on your shelf at your local supplement store might be contaminated with ingredients you weren't looking for, or maybe even entirely missing the ingredients you're paying top dollar for. So before you even consider getting yourself into supplements, just remember that there are a lot more important things you could be focused on, and that they're not without some potential risks. But which supplements should you actually consider looking at? The first is whey protein powder, which I consider to be more of a food product, really. It's just a convenient way to get some more protein in without adding a ton of calories to your diet. The second is good old-fashioned creatine monohydrate, which can make you a bit stronger and help you build slightly more muscle. And the final is a multivitamin, because it's literally 6 cents per serving. And in the case of a low-calorie diet, when you're restricting your food intake, it just help round out any vitamin or mineral deficiencies from your diet. Now that you have a solid understanding of how to lose fat through your diet, let me show you the most powerful motivator to keep you consistent with it for long enough that you can actually see big visible results. Recently, I saw a video of this girl who's just sitting alone in her bedroom, and you could tell she'd just been crying happy tears. She was feeling deeply emotional. For a few seconds, she says nothing, just sitting there. And she says, guys, I did it. I finally hit my goal weight. I've been working on this for 6 years. And I finally did it. That's the power of knowing that what you're doing is working. There is no fucking way this person would have been able to stick to her goals for 6 years without the confidence that her plan was working. Without proof that you are losing fat and moving in the right direction, you won't be nearly as motivated as you could be. And you don't want to put in months of effort only to realize you look the exact same as you did when you started, trust me. Keeping track of your fat loss progress means you can course correct early if things aren't working and capitalize on all that positive momentum that comes with seeing results. But how do you do that? Well, I like to think of this as a crime scene. If we had just a murder weapon, that's not enough evidence to put someone behind bars. But if we have CCTV footage and the guy left his fucking shoe behind,
looks like we got the bastard.
So start tracking your body weight daily, or at least 3 days per week. First thing in the morning, no food, no water. Whether or not you poop, doesn't matter. It's gonna fluctuate up and down regularly, but you wanna look for changes in the average from week to week. So you're looking at the average of your past 7 weigh-ins and comparing it to the coming 7 days of weigh-ins. Since your body weight's just the murder weapon though, you should also be looking at progress pictures. The easiest way to do this is just set up your phone selfie style video mode and record yourself standing in the bathroom, front of the camera, turn to the side, then turn to the back, and you go and just screenshot the 3 positions so you have 3 pictures in your phone. You can also take body measurements while you take pictures to get a more complete idea of how things are moving. It's just another clue at the crime scene, right? I like to do a flexed bicep measurement and one right around the waist at the navel with the tape just taut and level. These pictures and measurements will take you like 10 minutes a month, but it is so worth it. It's also worth looking for other non-scale victories too. Things like belt notches moving in, clothes fitting and feeling different, or people giving you compliments. I mean, here's my client, Nick. He's down over 60 pounds this year, showing how differently his clothes fit after he lost a bunch of weight. And there's really nothing more motivating than donating parts of your wardrobe that you no longer need, or unlocking old pieces of clothing that you used to love, but they don't fit you anymore. And look, if you're watching this video, I know you want to lose fat, you want to build muscle. Whether you have 50 pounds of fat or more to lose and you want to build some muscle along the way, or you're more in the skinny fat camp and you have 15, 20 pounds of fat to lose, and you feel like no matter what you do in the gym, you just can't really build muscle. And you're tired of spinning your wheels, trying to do all this stuff by yourself and not seeing the results you want, then apply for our one-on-one coaching program using the link in the description box. We'll set you up with a custom training and nutrition plan to help you get moving in the right direction. We'll give you feedback on what you should be doing in the gym and audit your technique to make sure you're getting the most out of every minute you spend in the weight room. And we'll offer support and accountability, checking in on you throughout the week, answering all your questions so that you're never guessing about whether or not you're on the right track with this. We've got limited spaces for how many folks we can work with and how many people we can take on at any one time. Just click the link in the description box, apply for coaching, and we'll be in touch if it sounds like you'd be a good fit. Okay, what if you've been doing all of this, but you're not losing any weight, or your progress just stalls? Your body is extremely good at surviving extended periods without food. That's part of what body fat is. It's your body's stored energy source. Before there was ever 7-Eleven or McDonald's, we could go days or weeks without food, but stay alive because we carry a bunch of extra calories around with us. But your body goes even further than that. As you start feeding it less calories, it'll downregulate how many calories you burn every day as a response. And it's not even things you can control. Your body just starts running a bit colder, you fidget a bit less. Your body literally becomes more efficient at extracting energy from the food you eat, so you poop out less calories seriously. And this is called metabolic adaptation. When it happens, the calorie goal that was initially helping you lose weight might stop working, especially if you've lost a lot of weight, because then you'll be a much smaller person and you'll burn fewer calories as a result. Ultimately, you never truly know how many calories you're burning each day. Even with those calculations I showed you earlier, they're just estimations based on huge data sets of people. But you might be on the lower end of average. So the calorie goals we set might not lead to immediate weight loss for you. So if it's not working, you need to adjust your calorie intake. But how do you do that? And the most important thing to keep in mind is that you should not adjust anything with your plan until you can be consistent with it first, unless you're adjusting to make it easier to stick to. So if you want to lose fat faster, just make sure that you are consistently and accurately hitting your calorie goals first before you touch anything. After that, if you still want to lose weight faster or things just aren't moving, here's what you need to do. I want you to imagine a matrix here, not the Lawrence Fishbone kind. The kind where you've got the x-axis and the y-axis. The x-axis is a scale from not very hungry to super hungry, and the y-axis is a scale from not very active to super active. And we're gonna use this to help you decide how you should make adjustments. If you stop losing weight and you're also not feeling very hungry each day, it's a pretty simple adjustment to just reduce your calories by something like 10% each day, and then see how your body weight responds over the next 2 weeks. But if you're super hungry all the time, you're thinking about food, and you don't have enough energy to really power through your workouts, and your mood is crashing, then reducing your calories is not the best option. So if you're in this area where you're super hungry, but you're not very active, it's a smarter decision to increase your daily activity levels instead of adjusting your food. Bumping your steps up by something like 2,000 steps per day, and then waiting 2 weeks to see how the body weight responds before making any further changes. And if you're the poor bastard who's in this zone where you're super hungry and you're already super active, we'll talk more about that in just a second. Now that you know that, let me show you how much weight you should aim to lose realistically so you can see some real visible progress. The truth is that there's no way to know for sure what your goal weight should be, but you need to lose enough for it to matter. That might end up being more than you think. Man, if I had a nickel for every time a dude told me, yeah, man, I just need to lose, 10 pounds and then I'll be shredded, I'll see my abs. Yeah, right. You start losing weight and you realize just how much fat is on you, hiding in places you would have never expected. You need to lose weight gradually, no matter what anyways. So you can always just reassess your progress at each milestone. Just keep in mind that your body is gonna look different at what you thought was your goal weight if you're building muscle along the way. I mean, look at the first time I lost a bunch of weight where I was 155 pounds or something like that to this most recent time where I lost a bunch of weight. Things look very different when you put on more muscle, right? If you're really not sure, just pick a time period that makes sense with your life instead of a goal weight. If you know you have a vacation coming up in 2 months, then just commit to entering fat loss mode until then. Losing weight for 8 or 12 weeks in a row is a really good way to go about it. And then you can just reevaluate and see if you still want to go further with it. For most guys, losing something like 10% of your body weight is going to be substantial enough to see some solid, visible progress. But what should you do if you have a much bigger weight loss goal? The best analogy I've heard from this comes from Dr. Mike Israetel. He says, if you're cooking in the kitchen, you're going to make a bunch of dishes. The pans get dirty and there's a bunch of sauce left over in them. And after a while, you got to clean things up. Otherwise, the omelets start tasting like tomato sauce and the scones start tasting like onions. And the same thing happens with weight loss, except instead of dirty dishes, you get progressively hungrier, more psychologically tired of restricting your food and just generally kind of burnt out on the whole fat loss process. And the sum of all those negative physiological and psychological effects is called diet fatigue. And after a while, you can become so fatigued on the dieting process that it just becomes such a grind to lose even a single pound because your body's just pushing back. So how do you clean up this diet fatigue so you can hit your goal weight without falling off the wagon or regaining a bunch of weight? The first step is to realize that you don't have to lose all your weight in one shot. You can take breaks along the way where you bump your calorie targets back up. And that increased calorie intake gives your body and your brain a much needed rest from the fat loss process and allows you to just temporarily enjoy a bit more dietary flexibility, gives you relief from the hunger and just the stress of weight loss overall. This is especially useful if you have vacations or busy life periods like you're moving house where weight loss would just be this unnecessary stressor. These diet breaks really do shine when you have big weight loss goals. If you have more than 50 pounds to lose, it can be really daunting mentally to even decide you want to get started with that. But if I told you that you just need to lose fat for 6 or 8 weeks before you take a break for 2 weeks or a month, that's a lot more approachable. But eventually you're going to have to do kind of a deep clean of the kitchen, which we'll talk more about towards the end of this video. But this next part of my system will show you how to build muscle you can actually see and feel so you don't end up scrawny and unhappy with your body once you've lost a bunch of fat. If you wanted to grow an apple tree, would you just place an apple seed on the kitchen table and wait for it to grow? Or would you plant it in some soil, water it, and give it plenty of sunlight? Of course, you do the second one, right? Because the seed doesn't do anything by itself. Most guys, though, they're taking the kitchen table approach when it comes to building muscle. You can think of eating enough protein and calories as the seed. Yes, it's definitely important, but it's not enough by itself. Training for muscle growth is the sunlight that actually makes this happen. No matter how much protein you eat, you're not going to build a significant amount of muscle without proper training. So stop thinking about your workouts as a tool for burning calories, getting fitter, getting stronger, or anything else. You have one mission with every rep and every set of every workout: build muscle. And look, all that other stuff is going to happen as a bonus and byproduct, but you have to focus on growing muscle while you're in the gym. And what I'm about to show you will set you up to build more muscle than 98% of guys in every gym across the world. To help you understand, you need to meet my dog Kiba. When I first got her as a puppy, my girlfriend and I were giving her all kinds of different commands. So she was confused when I said go bed versus when my girlfriend said go lay down. And she'd just end up getting frustrated and do nothing, or she'd just sit down instead. That's what happens when you don't send a clear and consistent message over and over. And your body will get confused too if you do a bunch of random exercises and workouts. And then it builds less muscle overall, and you wonder why nothing is working. So how do you send a loud and clear message to your body to start building muscle? Start following a training plan. That means sticking with a set of basic resistance training exercises for something like the next 6 months. Each week, you're giving your body a consistent message: build muscle. This will also save you time in the gym, give you back mental bandwidth that you can spend on other things, and it gives you clues as to whether or not you're actually building muscle, which we'll talk more about later. Which particular training plan you follow doesn't really matter all that much as long as the muscles you're trying to grow are getting hit at least twice per week. It's the consistent stimulus that matters most to start. Once we've got that down, we can start playing with all the other variables to get the results you want. Now that you know that, let me show you how to be sure you're training hard enough, lifting heavy enough, doing enough total sets, progressing your training, and using good technique so you can give your body a serious reason to start growing more muscle. But first, you need to know how to warm up properly so you can get the most out of your training. And if you skip your warm-ups, you'll build less muscle and probably get hurt more. The problem is that most warm-ups are a gigantic fucking waste of time. You do not need to be doing a mobility routine with foam rolling, stretching, and all this stuff. What we're really looking for from a good warm-up is a pre-flight check to make sure everything's feeling good and the equipment's set up properly, an increase in tissue temperature, which could help reduce risk of injury, and additional nervous system activation so you're ready to push hard, all without getting overly tired or wasting a bunch of time. But how do you do that? If you don't walk to the gym like I do, a quick 5 minutes on the treadmill incline walk is a good start. But even more importantly, you need to do a lighter version of the exercises you're about to do, doing gradual incremental warm-up sets that slowly work their way up in weight until you're doing a good hard set is the most specific and time-efficient way to prepare the exact joints and tissues you're going to be loading, and it gives you a chance to double check that your body and equipment are in a good place before you load some heavy weights on there. And taking those 2 or 3 lighter warm-up sets primes your nervous system for lifting heavier loads. So it's not just you standing up off the couch and going into a 300-pound leg press. But once you're done with your warm-up sets, how hard should you actually be pushing the real sets to make sure you're growing muscle? In order to help you understand, let's look at some training footage from my client Alex, from when we first started working together to more recently, and we'll see if you can tell the difference. In this first video, we see him doing his bicep curls. The technique looks solid. Nothing wrong with that, right? This is how I'd say probably 95% of guys are training at the gym. At the time, here's how his physique looked. He was having a hard time building the muscle he wanted, even though he's lifting 4 days a week and eating plenty of protein. Each week, he'd send me videos of his training technique, and I'd give him feedback on his form and his overall effort levels. And after a bit of coaching, here's a more recent set of curls. Can you see the difference between the two of these? The single most important factor in building muscle from your workouts is effort. As you can see, he just keeps doing reps in this clip until it gets so difficult that he can't do another one. And the results speak for themselves with Alex. He got a DEXA scan, he had 15% body fat, he's crushing it, I'm stoked for him. But the question is, how do you know if you're training hard enough to build muscle? A critical element of hard training is maintaining the quality of the reps as you push closer to that point of failure where you can't do another rep. I recommend taking a quick selfie style video of your own training to see whether or not your reps slow down as they get harder. It's an honest accountability check-in to see what your effort actually looks like. If you're just breezing through the reps and the weight never seems to slow down until the end of the set, you could be training a lot harder. If you start getting sloppy with your technique when the set gets hard, you could be training a lot harder by cleaning it up. If you're constantly stopping all your sets in an arbitrary number of reps, like 8, 10, or 12, again, you could probably be pushing a lot closer to failure. And you don't need to go all the way to momentary muscular failure where you can't physically get another rep, especially for bigger, gnarlier movements like RDLs or leg press, where you really don't want to risk your technique breaking down, or something might fall on you, or you just have to summon some fucking childhood demons in order to truly train to failure on those. For those movements, you can even leave like 1 or 2 good reps in the tank, which by the way is still really fucking hard training. I mean, seriously, here's what 1 rep left in the tank looks like for me on leg press. For all the smaller exercises you're doing, like bicep curls, lateral raises, push downs, or leg extensions, where there's just much less consequence of you actually hitting failure, you can push those things all the way to failure, or you can just get to the point where you know you won't get your next rep, which we can call like 0 reps in the tank. Training hard for muscle growth is a skill, and you'll get better at it the more you apply yourself to it, but you just won't get far without it. Training hard is critical, but how heavy should you be lifting in order to build as much muscle as you can? Most guys don't understand that heavy is a relative term. What's heavy for me might not be very heavy for you. I mean, here's me squatting 385 for a set of 10. And while you might think that's heavy training, in reality, heavy training would actually look more like this set of me squatting 485 for 1 rep. The better way to think about this is not how much weight should you be lifting on the bar, but how many reps are you training with? What rep range are you training in? If you're training hard, close to failure, giving it everything you have, and you're only able to do 3 reps on a set of squats, we call that pretty damn heavy, right? That'd be a lower rep range. But if you can do 7 reps, that weight falls more into a moderate rep range. And if you can do 13 reps with a given weight, we could call that a higher rep range or relatively lighter training. Even though all 3 sets would be brutally hard, they land somewhere on that spectrum of heavy to moderate to light training, or low rep, moderate rep, or high rep training. So which one should you be using to build muscle? Now, there are a lot of differing opinions out there on rep ranges, but most folks who are experienced bodybuilders, coaches, or even just hobbyist muscle growth enthusiasts will agree on this. You can build muscle doing practically any rep range as long as you're training close to failure, but there are a few caveats you need to be aware of. Firstly, there are logistical issues with ultra low or ultra high rep training, because doing sets of 2 reps close to failure would have to be so ridiculously heavy. You have to rest a very long time between sets to be ready for that and really hype yourself up in order to do a solid set with it. And certain exercises like bicep curls just don't feel great on your joints with extremely low rep ranges. And same thing with sets of 30 reps. By the time your legs approach failure on a set of 30 squats, you're either throwing up, passing out, or crying. Most of your work should probably end in that more moderate rep range, 8 to 12 reps with occasional forays in 5, 6, 7, or all the way up to 20 reps. And if you see a training plan that says bicep curls for 8 to 12 reps, that generally means that you want to pick a weight that brings you close to failure within that rep range outline. So if you can do 20 reps with the 30-pound dumbbells, then you're not training heavy enough. If you bump the weight up to 35 pounds, for example, and maybe you hit failure at 11 reps, perfect. Remember, being close to failure is what matters most here, not just the specific number of reps you do. Finding the rep range that works best for you, but the exercises in your training plan is really the secret sauce here. Now that you know how many reps you should do and how hard to push, let me show you how many sets you should be doing in order to get as jacked as possible. We know without a doubt that how many sets you do each week is a key factor in how much muscle you'll build. But most guys are getting this horribly wrong. Imagine those radar charts for character stats in video games. If you had like the warrior type character, he might have very high strength, attack, and defense stats, but his intelligence stats are way lower. Whereas like the wizard might have very low strength and attack stats, but his intelligence scores are super high. Your training variables are exactly the same with your workouts. If you train super hard, you can't train as frequently. If you do a ton of sets, each of those sets can't be as intense, right? If you push one variable all the way to one corner, the others have to come down. It's about keeping yourself in that sweet spot of stimulating new growth. Where most guys go wrong is they think they need to be doing a bunch of sets to stimulate more muscle growth, so they keep adding more and more. But doing a ton of sets doesn't really increase the training stimulus for most people because it dilutes the quality of the work they're doing. So you could likely be doing dramatically fewer sets than you think, but growing very well because the quality of each set is super high. So I recommend starting on the lower end of training volume, learn how to push hard and train close to failure first. Then you can always adjust upward later, but it's really difficult to learn how to train properly when you're doing too much and you're just fried all the time. So exactly how many sets should you start with? Something like 6 to 12 sets per body part per week is a good place to start. So your Monday workout might have 2 sets of hammer curls, 2 sets of preacher curls, and then your Friday workout might have 2 sets of incline dumbbell curls. But how do you know if you're doing the right amount of sets to build muscle? In order to help you understand this, let me show you this cool chart of my bicep growth. As you can see, my biceps are getting bigger. And if we overlay the second chart over top, you can see that it closely tracks with the size of my biceps. These are my personal bests on the preacher curl exercise. They track so well together because after you've gotten decently practiced at an exercise for a few weeks, the only way to get substantially stronger at it is by building more muscle tissue, especially with single joint movements like curls. And coincidentally, adding weight and reps over time to your exercises is also a great way to encourage your body to build more muscle. So this idea of progressively overloading or adding weight and reps to your exercises is both the push in the right direction to build more muscle and the proof that what you're doing is actually working. But how do you actually add reps and weight to keep getting bigger and stronger? Forget about just adding 5 pounds to the bar every time you train, like in a 5x5 program. That really only works well for beginners who are doing exclusively compound movements with lower rep ranges. If you try that with bicep curls, you're not gonna get far. Just ask Canadian national powerlifting champion Matt Venna, who literally did 5x5 bicep curls when he started lifting. I think that's hilarious. Instead, just use your rep range to guide you. So for your preacher curls, you can say that your rep range is 6 to 10 reps. And then you'll find a weight that challenges you for, let's say, 8 reps in week 1, and it's 30 pounds, and then you stick with 30 pounds, adding reps week after week after week until you can do 11 reps. And then you add a small amount of weight, which will naturally knock you back down towards the lower end of the rep range, and you start adding reps again from there. It's like a slinky. The front end inches forward, reps, until the back end needs to catch up. You add load, and then you repeat. Just don't rush to add weight to your exercises when you're not ready for it. It might take you a few weeks or even months with some of the smaller exercises with the same weight, just fighting for an extra rep here and there before you add a few pounds. On the flip side, don't let your inner wuss tell you to stay with the same weight for 6 months. You're gonna probably feel a little nervous or uncomfortable at times when you're adding some weight to the bar, so just be ready for that. Now that you know that, let me show you how to ensure you're using the right technique to build muscle and reduce your risk of injury. Look at these chopsticks. Now back to me. Now look at the chopstick again. When you use chopsticks, you don't just use the very tip of the chopstick, do you? Of course you wouldn't use just the tiny little tip of the chopstick. You'd use this whole outer area and further up towards the handle because it's way easier to pick up food that way, right? Ultimately, there's not just one correct way to use chopsticks. It's a spectrum of more and less appropriate. And the same thing is true with your technique in the gym when you're training to build muscle. There's not one perfect standard by which you have to adhere to with each exercise. In competitive powerlifting, there are standards for each movement, like with the squat, the bench press, and there are rules you have to stick to, but that doesn't exist when you're just trying to build muscle in the gym. There's a wide variety of techniques you can use to build muscle, and it's more about just finding what works for you and sticking with it. But you still need to stick with the few important principles here. Firstly, avoid techniques that cause you joint pain. That means adjusting your hand position, foot position, grip width, seat height, toe angle during squats, or whatever else you find that allows things to feel comfortable. Don't get me wrong, your quads are gonna burn and feel like they're gonna explode when you're doing a leg press, but that's not to be confused with knee pain or hip pain, right? Secondly, go as deep as you can comfortably under control. You don't have to spend 3 seconds lowering the weight on every rep, but you also shouldn't be dropping the bar on your chest and robbing yourself of all that growth that comes with the lowering portion of the movement. Also, this forces you to use more moderate weights. We've all seen the guy who loads up 10 plates on the leg press just to do the most micro penis reps you've ever seen, going 1 inch down, then back up and down repeatedly. And there's a reason that guy has the smallest legs in the gym. Don't be that guy. Going deeper, in most cases, causes more muscle growth, up until a point. As an example, in general, you'll build more muscle by fully extending your elbow during a bicep curl instead of just going halfway down. So in your workouts, you should aim to use a relatively full range of motion, going all the way back down and all the way back up. This will also help you kind of standardize your technique, so you're not just adding reps and weight each week, but sacrificing the quality of those reps in order to make that happen. On the way up, it's best to avoid using momentum or swinging the weights up or using other muscle groups to cheat the weight up. You're mostly just robbing the target muscle group of the work you're trying to give it in the first place. Just stick with a set technique and don't change it unless you have a good reason to. And don't overly stress if you can't feel the target muscle working right away. Just focus on pushing hard, and that'll happen over time. As long as it's comfortable in your joints and you're getting stronger with a relatively controlled technique and a decent range of motion, you're doing fantastic. The occasional dip into a bit of a less than strict technique is not gonna explode your spine or kill your gains. But how can you actually know that you're building muscle from your workouts? Well, just like with fat loss, you need to track your muscle growth progress, because if it isn't working, you wanna know about that early so you don't waste weeks following a training plan that isn't getting you results. And if it is working, you definitely want to capitalize on the motivation that comes with that and double down on exactly what's working, right? So figuring out whether or not you're building muscle is a huge deal. But how do you do that? The first and most obvious one is just noticeable changes in muscularity. If your shirt sleeves are fitting tight around your upper arm, that's a great sign. If you can poke your muscle or feel it, feels firmer, grainier, fuller, more dense, it's definitely growing. But you can go even deeper by taking progress videos where you just stand in front of your phone camera in the bathroom and get a video of your front, your side, your back flexed or unflexed, doesn't really matter. Something like just once a month and review that. You can also take measurements using measuring tape. I have this fancy electronic one that loops into itself and you can cinch it down, get a super accurate measurement, but ultimately any kind of tailor's measuring tape will do. You can look at your flexed bicep, your quad, your chest at the nipple line, or really anything else you're interested in. And lastly, but very importantly, you should look at your weights and reps for different exercises for a given muscle group. If your incline dumbbell press goes from 50 pounds for 10 reps to 80 pounds for 10 reps, and your machine press also jumped up over 6 months, that's a really good sign. Just like I showed you with my bicep curl numbers from earlier, progress on weight and reps across exercises for moderate rep ranges with a standardized technique is a fantastic sign that you're building muscle. The real magic is when you look at all this stuff together, which gives you a super clear and definitive picture as to whether or not you're actually growing muscle. But what if you're not growing muscle? There are gonna be times where things just do not work the way you want them to. You might hate some of the exercises in your training plan. You might have a busy period in your life where you can't train as much as you want to because you got a hot new Tinder date, and you're hanging out with them all the time. Or maybe you're finding that you're just not growing very well from what you're doing. And that means you need to make some adjustments to get better results. And the main things you'll want to adjust will be exercise selection, training volume, and training frequency. But how do you do that? Well, first of all, if you're growing some muscle, feeling good, and recovering well in between your workouts, change nothing. Keep doing what you're fucking doing. Most people don't realize that just getting your foot in the door, so to speak, and generating even a tiny bit of progress is a huge deal. And once you got that, you just need to stick with it until it stops working. And that could be a very long time. But what if you're really not building much muscle? Well, if you're recovering well in between your sessions, so you're not like trash sore all the time or having trouble sleeping, I'd double check your effort levels first and consistency. If those are excellent, feel free to add a little bit more sets to your program, increasing it slowly and just running that for a couple weeks first before adjusting again. If you're not growing well and you're not recovering from session to session and getting weaker, you're sore all the time, it's probably a good idea to back things off and do a bit less sets overall. You'll get more growth from less work. And if there are exercises that cause you joint pain, just swap them out or play with your technique a bit or the rep range until you find something that works better for you. Same thing if you just kind of fucking hate an exercise and it feels stale, but don't throw an exercise away just because it's not amazing after one session. Give it a solid go. As for your training frequency, if your schedule or your body doesn't realistically allow you to train more frequently, just don't do it. It would be much more productive to do 3 or 4 solid, hard, focused training sessions per week than 5 or 6 or 8 rushed, distracted, shitty, half-assed sessions. But the truth is that your muscle growth training and fat loss dieting will only be as effective as your ability to recover from it all. So here's how to get the best results from all the hard work you're putting in. Remember earlier when I said that training is the sunlight and the seed is the nutrition when it comes to building muscle? In the case of both building muscle and losing fat, your ability to recover is the whole pot, the soil, the fertilizer for this plant. Recovery is what keeps you adapting long-term and getting the most out of all the hard work you're already putting in. And most guys skip the recovery part of these videos and doing anything about it in their real life. And then you wonder why you're not seeing results when you could be building substantially more muscle and losing fat a lot faster and easier. Look, we see dozens of studies where people who restrict their sleep build less muscle and they lose less fat. They're hungrier, they have more cravings, especially for junk food. They're more stressed. And I can flash study after study at you, but what we really need to understand is your ability to sleep well and manage stress are the 2 most important variables when it comes to your recovery. You'll get leaner and more muscular much faster if you nail those. But how do you do that? Aiming for around 6 hours of sleep each night is a pretty good place to start. You can set a wake-up time and then just work backwards from there to find out when you should be going to bed. You can always monitor how you're feeling and adjust your bedtime if you're feeling too sleepy or if you're getting up too early. Now, the quantity of your sleep, how many hours you get, is important, but so is the quality of each of those hours. And if you're someone who really does struggle with sleepless nights, I recommend checking out the free app Insomnia Coach, which was developed to help veterans fall asleep. The big ticket items are these. Avoid screens before bed. I know you've heard this 100 times before, but it is so true and it makes a huge difference. Then keep your room dark and cool. Is that too dark? And find ways to physically and mentally relax yourself before bed, like doing deep breathing, meditation, journaling, having sex, doing yoga, whatever works for you. You'll want to keep a set schedule for your sleep and wake times too, so your body knows when it's time to start feeling sleepy right before you get into bed. Now, the next piece of the recovery puzzle is managing your stress levels, which will also help you lose more fat, reduce your hunger levels, make you less prone to emotional eating, and help you build more muscle. Whenever possible, you'll want to avoid situations that make you stressed in the first place, like taking on too much stuff at work or ruminating on negative thoughts or hanging around people who make you stressed out. And then just incorporate some de-stressing activities into your life, like journaling or hobbies, sports, spending time in nature or with your family or with your pets, or use meditation. Really, the hard part is that stress management isn't just something you do once and then you're good to go. It's an ongoing process of doing things that you sometimes don't want to do, but you know are ultimately what's best for you. Kind of like lifting weights. And this is something that I personally struggle with, balancing what I want to do with all this work stuff and training and still being a good partner and seeing my family and everything. It can be really tricky at times, but I swear, man, when you manage stress effectively, it is one of the most rewarding things you can do. Now that you know how to lose fat, here's what you should do once you hit your goal weight so you can have an absolutely kick-ass physique for the long term. If you follow the principles in this video, at a certain point, you're gonna have a holy shit moment. You step out of the shower, you'll look in the mirror, and you'll say, holy shit, this is as lean as I wanna be. Either you'll get as lean as you wanna be, or your body will tell you that it's time to stop losing fat by making you super hungry and increasing that diet fatigue that we talked about earlier. Whether you wanna take your physique to the next level by building more muscle, or you just wanna maintain the new lean physique that you currently have, in either case, you need to stop losing weight and fat. But how do you do that without gaining a bunch of the weight back that you work so hard to lose? Here's the system. First, Keep repeating fat loss and diet break cycles until you're as lean as you want to be. Whether that's one 12-week diet to get you lean, or a 15-week diet, a 4-week break, and then another 15-week diet to lose a ton of fat. It doesn't really matter how you break it down. Then once you reach your goal weight, or leanness, you increase your calories to maintenance. Now, you should anticipate a 2 to 3% bump in your weight. Don't freak out. It's not fat. It's just extra carbs, sodium, bloat, that'll bump your weight up. You're gonna wanna keep doing all the things that help you lose fat in the first place, like daily activity, keeping that high, workouts, healthy eating, and progress tracking. I know it's tempting, but don't jump into eating a bunch of treats right away. Slowly ease them back in as the diet fatigue starts to drop. While you're in this super hungry state, that's when you need that low calorie, high volume food the most. Now, if you're happy with where you're at body fat wise, you wouldn't mind just slowly putting on a bit of muscle from your training over time, you can just keep your calories at a maintenance level and continue to train for muscle growth. Alternatively, if you want to maximize your muscle growth and you're cool with adding a bit more body fat along the way, in order to grow as much muscle as you could do a nice slow lean bulk, increasing your calories by an additional 200 calories per day or so on top of your maintenance, and aiming to gain something like 1% of your body weight per month while training hard for muscle growth. You do that until you're a little softer than you'd like, something like 6 or 12 months. Then you do a short fat loss diet to clean up any excess fat you've gained along the way. You'll be more muscular, leaner, and you just repeat that process as much as you'd like. Now that I've shown you everything you need to know in order to lose fat and build muscle, and probably put myself out of a job as a personal trainer by giving this all away for free, you need to know how to avoid the 3 most common mistakes I see people making when it comes to losing fat. Otherwise, none of this stuff will matter. So make sure you watch this video next, where I show you what this actually looks like when you put it into practice.